Good morning. I am Dr. Suraiya Shahin and today I will deal a very important topic, and this is the Child by Premchand. It's a short story by Premchand. Premchand, a great Indian writer, is known for his writing for social reform. He is famous for writing over 300 short stories, 14 novels, many essays, letters, plays, and translations. His literary works expose the prevalent realities of the society. As we find the voice of the marginalized class of people, the exploited class of people in most of his works. His writings reflect the issues of the poor and the middle class of people, widow remarriage, the need for land reform, and the abolition of the system of dowry and untouchability. Similarly, his short story, The Child, deals with the true picture of Indian society. The narrator of the short story is a rich landlord who employs the main character Gangu, who works as a servant. Means Gangu is the main character in the short story who works as a servant to the narrator, and the narrator of the short story is a rich landlord. In the short story, Gomati Devi is a widow who came to the widowed ashram a few years ago. The officials had married her off 3 times, but each time she left her husband. Finally, the secretary of the ashram expelled her, and now she lived in the mohalla and became the source of fun and entertainment for the rascals of that mohalla. As the story opens, the narrator of the short story speaks. People call Gangu a Brahman, and Gangu behaves like one. My sires and servants salam me from a distance. Gangu never does that. Perhaps he expects me to touch his feet. The opening paragraph of this short story reveals the inequality and caste disparity prevailed in the brutal system of Indian society. Gangu is a leading character of this short story. Gangu is a leading character, main character of this short story who works as a servant in the narrator's household. And who is the narrator? Narrator is a rich landlord whom Gangu serves. Now, what happens? Gangu appeared to be very much different from the other servants of the narrator, since Gangu belonged to a high caste called Brahman. He didn't bow and show respect to his master as the other servants behaved with their master. By nature, Gangu is portrayed as a man of short-tempered, but by heart, he is a good person, kind person. In reality, he didn't have the characteristics of an ideal Brahman. Unlike the Brahmins, he was not educated. He didn't take bath in the river and pray regularly. He was too much proud of his own caste, Brahman, and on the basis he expected respect and service from others. The writer satirized the Indian caste system by writing here about the Brahmanism characteristics of Gangu when he writes, he is totally illiterate. Even then, he is a Brahman and expects others to reverence and serve him. But why shouldn't he? When people are holding on to the wealth inherited from their ancestors under the belief that they themselves have created that wealth, then why should he give up the privilege and status bequeathed by his ancestors? This is his birthright, as the narrator says. All these things. Through this verse, the writer exposed the caste privilege given to the high caste Brahman. That's why he writes that why shouldn't Gangu be proud of his own caste, Brahman? He must be proud of it because socially he has been given that birthright even though he is totally illiterate. He also mocks the caste system when he writes that Gangu received this status of Brahmanism from his ancestors. As the story proceeds, the narrator also talks about the broad mind of Gangu, who is eager to marry Gomti, who is known as a woman of bad reputation. We find an interesting dialogue between Gangu and his landlord when he wishes to marry Gomti. Now, he goes to his landlord and in a slow voice says, Gangu says to his landlord, please relieve me of my duties. Now I won't be able to serve under you. Now I won't be able to serve under you. Huzur, I don't want to work under you. Gangu here also appreciates his landlord when he says, very few people are as good natured as you, Huzur, but I am in a situation in which I can no longer work under you. I can no longer work with you. And I don't want that your reputation should suffer because of me. The narrator, who is the landlord, didn't understand the reason of quitting his job. So it perplexed his landlord and curiously wanted to know the cause. In a mood of anger, the narrator, who is the landlord, stated, why do you talk in riddles? Tell me straight what the matter is. Now Gangu was bound to disclose his relationship with that widow Gomati and so very politely replied to his landlord. The truth is the woman who has been expelled from the widow's ashram, the same Gomati Devi. Then his landlord asked impatiently, yes, she has been expelled. So what? What has that to do with your job? Means, what's the connection between the woman who has been expelled and the resignation of your job? Then, with a heavy breath, Gangu said, I want to marry her. The moment Gangu said, I want to marry her, the landlord looked at him with astonishment because it was really surprising to know about the new story of his servant. Being furious, the narrator, who is the landlord, said, this illiterate and orthodox Brahman, untouched by new ideas, is marrying this lecherous woman whom no one would even let into their house. In an agitated mood, he shouts at Gangu and said, when she had forsaken three men, how long she would stay with you? You fool! Does anyone come from so far, spend thousands of rupees just to drive away a woman? At this, Gangu replied politely, with emotion, Huzur, no woman can stay where there is no love. A wife doesn't need just food and clothing, she needs love too. He assured his landlord that his marriage with Gomti will end happily. So, after resignation from his job, Gangu married Gomti and lived in a shack in the same mohalla. Now, Gangu survived by hawking chaat in a bazaar, and the narrator always inquired about his well being because after marriage, his life was a testing ground for a social question. Not only a social question, but also a psychological one too. As the time passes, after a few months, one day, Gomti runs away from her home. Gomti runs away from her home. When the narrator heard about that Gomti had run away, he was very happy to hear it because he had already predicted it that she will not stay with Gangu because she had already left her three husbands. And she was not a woman of trustworthy in the eyes of the narrator. So the writer exposed the deceitful nature of Gomti through the words of Gangu when one day the narrator suddenly met Gangu and asked about his well-being. At this, Gangu felt ashamed and in a disturbed mind expressed his emotion. When tears flowed from his eyes and with great pain said, Babuji, Gomti deceived me too. Babuji, Gomti deceived me too. At this, the narrator replied, I had already warned you, but you didn't listen to me. Now have patience. So, as the story proceeds, later on, Gangu brings back Gomti into his life. Gangu one day heard that Gomti was in a hospital in Lucknow. He found that she had delivered a boa which he received too. When the narrator comes to know that Gomti has returned to Gangu's home with a newly born baby boa, he very curiously comes to meet him and mocks him by asking Gangu, how long have you been married? Then Gangu replied, It is the seventh month. It is the seventh month. At this, the narrator ironically said, So your baby was born in the sixth month of your marriage, right? And you are claiming this baby as if you are the father of this baby. You are talking nonsense, Gangu. Then Gangu, with a heart filled with emotion, said, Babuji, you are such a good human being. Means Gangu wants to tell that, Babuji, you know everything, you are a mature person. Then the narrator, who is the landlord of Gangu, he embraced the baby and offered the blessings. The writer ultimately presented Gangu as an innocent heart who accepted that child as his own. So the story is all about social awareness and social reformation. Thank you.